Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study of the entire Bible. We are in Esther, the book of Esther, Hadassah, chapters 8 through 10, closing out this book as well as this section of the Old Testament, writing the historical narrative. And then we're going to move on to another section, but this has been a long section, but very exciting. But this book closes out really, as we have said before, a wonderful story. And as I said before, as an author myself, and I have written, I haven't published, but written screenplays. The plot to this book is straight out of a movie script. And remember, it was written way before Hollywood scripts. But I mean, just the plot line, the plot twists. So we see that Esther, or Hadassah, who was brought to the kingdom for such a time as this, that the evil Haman, who hated Mordecai and worse hated the Jews, devised a plot to annihilate the entire race of the Jews, got the king to sign the irrevocable law of the Medes and the Persians, that once that law is enacted, you cannot revoke it. And he wrote it, that the Jews would be annihilated. Now this is very interesting because this is kind of like when you think about a horror film, right? You always see where they knock the villain out, and then the villain comes back for one more stab, one more punch, one more thing. Well, the story's not over. We saw that Haman's evil plot was discovered. He was hanged, but the story is not up. And then also, as you may look at the thumbnail, I want to say, was this kind of the true origins of Christmas? I'll explain. Let's get into it. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see here. I gotta do something here. I forgot that. Let's do it like this. I don't know if I'm. No. Oh, I forgot to go to my other screen here. Here we go. All right, there we go. Okay. So, chapter 8. Chapter 8. So the story is not over, right? In other words, Haman is defeated. However, there is that decree, right? The irrevocable law. So verse 8 says, the same day King Ahasuerus awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Now, go back. Remember the wife, remember the wife who encouraged Haman to erect a gallows? Well, now she's homeless, right? She's broke. All right. So the same day King Ahasuerus awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jew. Mordecai entered the king's presence because Esther had revealed her relationship to Mordecai, meaning, I'm a Jew. Because remember, he was kind of like, what, who ordered your execution? Verse 2, the king removed his signet ring and had recovered, he had covered from Haman and gave it to Mordecai. Excuse me. And Esther put him in charge of Haman's estate. Now, kind of interesting, notice that she is kind of wheeling and dealing as queen, okay? So she's just more than just arm, what they call it, an arm rifle, eye candy, and an arm rifle. She's wheeling and dealing now. Verse 3. Then Esther addressed the king again. She fell at his feet, wept, and begged him to revoke evil Haman the Agagite and his plot he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the gold scepter towards Esther, so she got up and stood before the king. She said, if it pleases the king, and I have found approval before him, If the matter seems right in the king, right to the king, and I am pleading in his sight, let the royal edict be written, let it be revoked. In the document, the scheming Haman son, let it revoke the documents. The scheming Haman son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the province of the king's province. I'm going to say Hermethodite, and then the Hermethodite, the Agagite. Sorry, butchering these things again. Okay, verse 6. For how could I bear to see the disaster that would come to my people? How could I bear to see the destruction of my relative? Now, just kind of a note, by the edict itself, she would have to have been killed too, being a Jew. And that's something he could not have stopped. But, so how do you do this? So King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, look, I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he was hanged on the gallows because he attacked the Jews. You may write in the king's name whatever pleases you concerning the Jews, and seal it with the royal signet ring. A document written in the king's name and sealed it with the royal signet ring cannot be revoked. In other words, I can't do anything about the law. What is going to be amazing about this, what we're going to see, is how many people wanted to kill the Jews. That's going to be amazing. Now, you remember that when he got the king to sign it, they sent out letters and appointed a very specific day where this was going to happen. And it only had to happen that day. In other words, it wasn't going to be ongoing, but on a very specific day, you had the right to kill a Jew. That's basically what this edict was. Verse 9, on the 23rd day of the month, that is the month of Sullivan, the royal scribes were summoned. Everything was written exactly as Mordecai ordered for the Jews, to the satraps, the governors, the officials of the 127 province from India to Kush. The edict was written for each province in its own script, with ethnic group in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in King Ahasuerus' name and sealed the edicts with the royal signet ring, and he sent the documents by mounted couriers who rode fast horses bred from the royal racing mares. The king gave the Jews in each of every city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate every ethnic and provincial army hostile to them, including women and children, and to take their possessions as spoils of war. This would take place on a single day throughout all of the province of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. Copy of the text issued as law throughout every province was distributed to all the peoples, so the Jews could be ready to avenge themselves against the enemies on that day. The carriers rode out in haste on their royal horses at the king's urgent command, and the law was also issued in the fortress of Susa. Mordecai went from the king's presence, clothed in royal purple and white, with a great gold crown and a purple royal of fine linen. The city of Susa shouted and rejoiced, and the Jews celebrated with gladness, joy, and honor. In every province and every city, wherever the king's command and his law reached, joy and rejoicing took place among the Jews. There was celebration and a holiday. We'll get back to that. And many of the ethnic groups of the land professed themselves to be Jews, and many of the ethnic groups of the land professed themselves to be Jews because fear of the Jews had overcome them. In other words, don't kill me, don't fight against me, I'm a Jew as well. So verse 9. So the king's command and the law went into effect on the 13th day of the 12th month of the month of Adar. On that day, when the Jews' enemies had hoped to overpower them, just the opposite happened. The Jews overpowered those who hated them. Now, as I said, this was amazing in that how many people really was going to take advantage to kill the Jews. In other words, had Haman's plan succeeded, these people in masses were going to slaughter the Jews. Verse 2. In each of King Ahasuerus' province, the Jews assembled in their cities to attack those who intended to harm them. Not a single person could withstand them. Terror of them fell on every nationality. All the officials of the province, satraps and governors, and the royal civil administrators aided the Jews because they were afraid of Mordecai. For Mordecai exercised great power in the palace, and his fame spread throughout the province as he became more and more powerful. So, as in a sense, he took the place. He took the same kind of position like Joseph had in Egypt. But he was also a good man, a just man. Verse 5, the Jews put all the enemies to the sword, killing and destroying them. They did what they pleased to those that hated them. In the fortress of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, including Parshadath, Dalphon, Asphas, Portia, Alda, Arenda, Parmashta, Arish, Aridid, and Vartha. They killed these sons of Haman, sons of the Hamerthite, the enemy of the Jews. However, they did not seize any plunder. So understand too that notice this, that the sons of Haman were also killed because they tried to carry out their father's edict. Verse 11. On that day, the number of people killed in the fortress of Susa was reported to the king. The king said to Queen Esther in the fortress of Susa, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, including Haman's 10 sons. Now that's interesting right there, right? You would have thought that the sons would have said, okay, Dad's plan failed. Wasn't good advice, Mom. We don't have a home. We're broke. Okay. Then he says, the king said to Queen Esther in the fortress of Susa, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, including Haman's 10 sons. What have they done in the rest of the warrior province? Whatever you ask will be given you. Whatever you seek will be done. Esther answered, if it pleases the king, may the Jews who are in Susa also have tomorrow to carry out today's law, and may the bodies of Haman's 10 sons be hung on the gallows. The king gave the orders to this to be done. So a law was announced in Susa, and they hung the bodies of Haman's 10 sons. Then they were already killed with their failed attempt. Don't feel sorry for the mother either, because remember, the mother was just as evil as Haman. She's the one that gave him the suggestions to build the gallows to hang Mordecai. Verse 15, the Jews in Susa assembled again on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men in Susa, but they did not seize any plunder. The rest of the Jews in the royal province assembled to defend themselves and got rid of their enemies. They killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but did not seize any of the plunder. Now again, this is amazing how many people hated the Jews and sought to carry out Haman's plan to destroy them. 75,000. This is amazing, right? Just amazing. They fought on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and the rest on the 14th day, and it became a day of feasting and rejoicing. But the Jews in Susa had assembled on the 13th day, and the 14th day of the month. They rested on the 15th day of the month, and it became a day of feasting and rejoicing. This explains why the rural Jews who live in the villages observe the 14th day of the month of Adar at the time of rejoicing and feasting. It is a holiday when they send gifts to one another. Now, right here, remember I told you about the could this be the original origins of Christians? So what do we do on Christmas, right? Well, we observe the birth of Jesus, and some people will argue with that. Okay, let's not get into argument over that. But the idea of the concept of celebrating Christmas is to celebrate the birth of Jesus, and then notice when we buy gifts. Now, of course, it has been totally taken over and commercialized. But I want you to just kind of see this, that this is just a thought here, that this could be, right? It is a holiday when they send gifts to one another. And that it's just a thought, right? But notice right here. In other words, people sometimes will say, well, people celebrate the pagan holiday of Christmas. And my reply to that always is, well, what pagan are they celebrating? And again, I'm not going to get into a defense of Christmas here and all that, but just think about it. What holiday are they really celebrating? Verse 20. Mordecai recorded the events and sent the letters to all the Jews and all of King Ahasuerus' province, both near and far. He ordered them to celebrate the 14th and the 15th days of the month Adar every year. Now, of course, he just explained why there was 2 days. One day was in the city of Susan, and then it reached the Jews in the rural areas the next day. That's why they celebrate 2 days. Verse 22. Because during these days, the Jews got rid of their enemies. That was the month their sorrow was turned into rejoicing, and their mourning into a holiday. And they were to be the days of feasting, rejoicing, and the sending of gifts to one another and to the poor. Again, what I want to say about Christmas is that this kind of really sum up the Christmas celebration, even though it has been corrupted, it has been commercialized. But the idea of the birth of the Savior, turning our sorrow, guilt, sin, because of the giving of God's Son, and then, of course, the sending of gifts to one another. But also notice he said to the poor. So I'll say this, that if you really wanted to truly celebrate Christmas in a truly spiritual way, then this should be the way that it should be celebrated. Not forgetting the poor, okay? All right, verse 23. So the Jews agreed to continue the practice they had begun, as Mordecai had written them to do. For Haman, the son of Hammedatha, and the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them. He cast the pur, that is the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when the matter was brought before the king, he commanded by letter that evil plan. But when the matter was brought before the king, he commanded by letter that the evil plan Haman had devised against the Jews would return on. I'm messing up it. Verse 25, guys. I'm read it again. But when the matter was brought before the king, he commanded by letter that the evil plan Haman had devised against the Jews return on his own head, and that he should be hanged with his sons on the gallows. For this reason, the days are called Purim, from the word pur. Now, Purim became a new holiday that the Jews observed, okay? Which, as I said before, you could say it became, to me, the forefather of the celebration of Christmas. Because of all of these instructions in the letter, as well as what they had witnessed and what had happened to them, the Jews bound themselves, the descendants, and all who had joined with them to a commitment that they would not fail to celebrate these 2 days each and every year according to the written instructions and according to the time appointed. We kind of switched it up, didn't we? Because we celebrate Thanksgiving as 2 days instead of Christmas. But okay. Well, actually, sometimes Christmas Eve, but Christmas, of course, is the actual holiday. Verse 28. These days are remembered and celebrated by every generation, family, providence, and the city, so that these days of Purim will not lose their significance in the Jewish life, and their memory will not fade from their descendants. Now, I understand that the celebration of Purim wasn't necessarily our Christmas version at all. It was a celebration that the plot to destroy them was overthrown and defeated. That's what they were celebrating. Verse 29, Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote this second letter with full authority to confirm the letter about Purim. He sent the letters with messages of peace and the faithfulness to all the Jews who were in the 127 province of the king of Ahasuerus, in order to confirm these days of Purim at their proper time, just as Mordecai the Jew and the Queen Esther had established them, and just as they had committed themselves and their descendants to the practice of fasting and lamentations. So Esther's command confirmed these customs of Purim, which was written into the record. So Esther, again, was more than just, as I said, eye candy. She was more than just, what they call it, eye candy, arm rife, She did some things. She accomplished some things. God used her. Chapter 10, verse 1, King Ahasuerus imposed a tax throughout the land, even to the farthest shores. All of his powerful and magnificent accomplishments, and the detailed account of Mordecai's great rank, to which the king had honored him, have they not been written in the historical records of the kings of the Media and Persians. Mordecai the Jew was second only to the king Ahasuerus, famous among the Jews and highly popular with many of his relatives. He continued to seek good for his people and to speak for the welfare of all his descendants. So he was a Jew used in God in a foreign land. Okay, a wonderful story, an extremely wonderful, powerful story here. That God used, again, a woman, Hadassah, and we see the wisdom. Okay, that how God used her. So, all right, guys, we're through with Esther, and we're also through with the historical section of the Old Testament. In our next study, we're going to get into the books of poetry, wisdom. So the book of Job, very interesting book. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I will see you in the next study.